myself, my name is O-H to the O-V. I used to move snowflakes by the OC. I guess even back then you can call me CEO of the ROC. Fresh out the frying pan into the fire. I be the music biz #1 supplier. Flying in a piece of paper bearing my name. Got the hottest chick in the game wearing my chain. That's right, not DOC, but similar to the letters. No one can do it better. You can blame Sean, but I ain't invented the game. I just rolled the dice trying to get some change. I done came through the block, but I ain't invented the game. Still the vibe is in my veins. Only God can check me. Only God can check me. So I'm gone.
Play it day one with Game Pass.
Driver, start your
It's ready to go for a new racing season here in St. Pete, and Grosjean launches.
Grosjean with a great jump. That's what you want. Try to get clear of all those animals coming from behind, and it's Pato O'Ward firing up the inside.
Look at Alex below down there in the blue and white car, 3 wide through turn 1. Townsend, he's going to try the outside of turn 2. They're filing through side by side. This is where we've seen so many problems in contact already for a McLaren.
I think that's Rosenquist. Felix Rosenquist with more damage in the back. The track is total chaos.
Looks like Devlin DiFrancesco airborne. Simon Pagenaud I see in the wall. His teammate Elio Castroneves sideways. Huge accident down the track is blocked. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a red flag here. And then you see there the black car. That's Santino Ferrucci into the back of Elio Castroneves. Devlin DiFrancesco goes around. Stingray Robb swerves and hits Pagenaud. Wow, I have never seen anything like that, Townsend.
Let's try for the second time. Here we go. The Firestone Grand Prix is underway.
A little bit of oversteered wheel spin from Colin Herta coming off the last corner, so a great jump from Romain Grosjean as they all seem to be pretty much in line. It's Marcus Armstrong looking at the inside of Alexander Rossi, but unable to make the pass.
And there's a caution on the racetrack. This will give Dixon a bit of an advantage, putting on those alternate tires, guys, and this might wind up being a caution.
Here's Kyle Kirkwood in the pink car for Auto Nation on the inside of Connor Daly, tagged the back of the Bitnile Chevy, and that's the cause for this most recent full course caution.
Great jump, big wiggle from Scott McLaughlin on the power. Same for Pato O'Ward. He's already defending for Marcus Ericsson. Ericsson saying, no, I'm going to stay on the clean side of the racetrack.
All right, here you go. Defending winner wants to win again, but Romain Grosjean in that yellow and red DHL Honda wants to win for the first time. Alexander Rossi on his old teammate Colton Herta around the outside. You've got it. No, you don't. Herta fights back.
Colin Herta. Oh, Rinus VK. We have a car up and over. Kyle Kirkwood's involved. That looks like Jack Harvey as well. Rinus VK in the tires. Huge accident. Yellow flag is out.
That's the second.
You're right.
Second car airborne.
Second fully airborne car. Kyle Kirkwood
Hey, but the car is not.
cleared a tabletop.
Scott McLaughlin in a Dex Imaging Chevy leads the way over Romain Grosjean. There's the green. Let's go. Turn 1 is a key spot at this track. Dixon has already popped out, trying to get ahead of his teammate.
Looking back, Scott Dixon in that orange and blue PNC car has a run on his teammate, Ericsson, in the red and white, but Ericsson tries to defend. Dixon having none of that.
And Will Power is looking on. Graham Rahal in the United Rebels car. Great escape.
That was closer than you definitely want. As we ride on board the United Reynolds on board of Graham Rahal. Man, that was nearly Did exactly what we saw Rinus VK do down. Oh no, that's past turn 4. That's turn 8.
Way. This is Colton's onboard. Watch how late he decides to try to go around Will Power.
So Will Power, the car on your right in front, gets pushed wide by Marcus Ericsson. He's offline now. Colton Herman's
contact. Power left front into Colton's right rear as Colton was forcing the issue on the outside.
Into the second half of this Firestone Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. Let's go. McLaughlin at the front. The yellow and red DHL Honda is Romain Grosjean. Here comes Pato O'Ward on the inside. Not quite close enough. Dixon's close to O'Ward. Here comes Alex Palou on the inside. All slipping and sliding, but gathers control. Turn 1, look at the yellow car. There's McLaughlin on the right. They're at speed. They may come together. Whoa! McLaughlin holds the lead.
But there's no way I think he'll be able to hold them off on cold tires. Grosjean goes to the outside on hot tires and on the preferred line.
Is it possible? No, it's not.
Contact.
It is both of them crashing.
And O'Ward goes through. Pato O'Ward to the front.
That was the move for the race win in both of their minds.
And it came down to a simple game of chicken. Who's going to break first? Who's going to give an inch? The answer? Nobody.
And Pato O'Ward of Arrow McLaren leads this field, leads Ericsson, Dixon, and his new teammate Alexander Rossi into turn 1.
Top 5 are spread out, but there was all kinds of confusion at the back as somebody got really squirrely off the final corner and stacked up positions 5 through 12.
Not done yet. Pato O'Ward could win at St. Petersburg.
Oh, guys, problem.
Is something wrong with him? Ericsson to the lead.
He had a huge slide coming off the corner, and he must have had a misshift. Maybe there was an overboost. That's an engine situation that temporarily limits power, and the lead now has gone to Marcus Ericsson.
Well, he drove like we have never seen him drive to win the Indianapolis 500 last May. And now Marcus Ericsson in the Husky Chocolate Honda is a winner again, but this time on the streets of St. Petersburg. Delivers Chip Ganassi the first victory of a new season in the most eventful race.
Good job. Great job. Thank you. Thank you.
What a drive from Marcus Ericsson, who wins at St. Pete. Just the second win ever for Chip Ganassi Racing here in the streets of St. Pete. And Marcus does it once again. So impressive last year. Now he wins race number 1 of 2023.
Watch the PPG 375 Sunday, April 2nd at noon on NBC.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program brought to you by Sinister One Productions. My name is Frank Santorowski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk over this past weekend of racing, where we had all 3 of the major series in action. Joining me today, I've got Levi and Richard Uden. Fellas, how we doing?
Hey, how's it going? Evening.
All right. So before we get started, I want to once again thanks Forza Motorsport for sponsoring us. I hope that you will look for that game coming on Xbox soon. If you're into that sort of gaming thing, that is a very realistic look at the simulation. But so let's talk about this past weekend, right? We just showed you the highlights from the IndyCar race, which of the 3 major races this weekend, that was probably the most interesting and exciting one, the one with the most going on for sure. But at the end of the day, it was Marcus Ericsson winning, which it always seems like whenever it's a very eventful race, we're talking about a red flag in Detroit a while back, a red flag in Nashville a while back, an Indy 500 where Scott Dixon blew the lead with a pit stop penalty, and Ericsson has always been there to pick up the pieces, which just shows you. And this is his 4th career win. he just Chip Ganassi says the guy just gets better and better. And Richard, you and I have talked about Ericsson when he first joined the series, and we both kind of think very highly of him. But I mean, here's a guy who knows how to stay out of trouble, and he's I mean, in order to pick up the pieces, you need to be there at the end of the race. But here he is, early.
He did keep all four wheels on the ground this time and get the win.
This time he did,
which is more than he did in Nashville.
Which is more than some of the other guys did in this race.
Yes.
So let's talk about the Andretti team, right? Those cars were flying in qualifying. Then they were flying during the race, but it was a different type of flight they took. So, the weekend started off great for the Andretti team. They led all the practice sessions. Grosjean won the pole, but it seemed like each and every one of their guys, save for one of them made it to the finish. I forget which one. But all their guys ran into trouble. Some of them ran into big trouble. Two of them ended up airborne. And so they walk away rather empty-handed after a great qualifying and a showing there. And most of the stuff was not their fault. The very opening lap, we saw chain reaction crash that looks, if you ask me, started by Scott Dixon. But Dixon fans will vehemently deny that, and some people say maybe Felix Rosenqvist, but certainly started with those two, and then the field just bottled up behind them. Took both Shank cars out, Devil DeFrancesco in the Andretti car, and then Benjamin Peterson in the Foyt car at the tail end of the thing, just plowed right in there. I don't know if he lifted or if he just didn't have any time to react. That's up in the air. Richard and I were disagreeing about that, but he drove right underneath DeFrancesco, launched his car up in the air. And if you saw any of the kind of post-race stuff with the close-up photographs of Peterson's car, you can see that aero screen really held up when he went right underneath another guy. So, yeah. So now, Lee, you don't watch a lot of IndyCar racing, but you tuned in this week, and I mean, tell our viewers what you told me.
So I woke up from my nap from NASCAR because that race just put me to sleep this weekend. So I said, the Indy race is on. Let me switch over to that, and so I caught the start of it, and not even the first lap we got a rodeo and a yard sale going on. We got cars flying all over the place. There's debris everywhere. And I was like, this is going to be great. And I stuck with the whole race. And then we had another rodeo later on in the race and some more yard sale stuff. Like, I think you got me hooked. I'm on this IndyCar bandwagon. I'm in it. This is good.
Yeah.
St. Pete did not disappoint in the rodeo circuit this weekend at all.
Yeah, so, not all the races are quite that eventful or quite that chaotic, but we certainly have a few that are. If you look at the podium there, you've got Dixon, who kind of started the wreck at the start there, ended up unscathed, finished on a podium, finished third. Second place, Pato O'Ward, he's my pick for the champion this year. So good start for him. And again, Ericsson is your winner there. But some of your other favorites there, Grosjean and McLaughlin, those are two guys who were kind of dicing up at the front and got into one another after the race. And it kind of falls on McLaughlin there. But these two guys are great friends. And there's a big deal made about the two of them getting together and having a little man-to-man talk about it, sharing a hug, and, letting bygones be bygone there. So, it's nice to see that kind of sportsmanship in the sport there, although sometimes rivalries make ratings, but it's just nice to see those two guys trying to forgive and forget. And again, another fast car, Colton Herta, ended up in the wall. A lot of guys. I think only 12
hands
cars.
Of another Penske car as well.
Yeah. That was Will Power. Will Power got into but the surprising thing, I guess, at the end of the day is that the Penske cars were kind of nowhere all weekend. They weren't really nowhere, but they certainly weren't at the front. And this is
by their standards anyway.
By their standards, yeah. But St. Pete is typically a Penske track. They've ruled there they've won most of the races there. So, yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how the season plays out. But all the guys we expected to be strong were strong. It's just a lot of them didn't make it to the finish. But again, Ericsson, I was a little, thinking Ganassi was a little quiet in the offseason, but, Ericsson was there when it counted. And Alex Palou had a good finish as well, and Scott Dixon on the podium. So,
but that whole race sums up to me, having following IndyCar for the last 10 years or so. That's the whole sort of Scott Dixon mentality, and Marcus is obviously picking that up on, not having the best car, but being there at the end, picking up podium, picking up wins, picking up the, because you got to remember, it was 3 laps from the end. Pato O'Ward was still leading, and then he had an engine not misfire. I think it was, he got a little bit loose coming off the exit of the final corner there, and the engine sort of wasn't very happy and cut out for a brief moment there, and he lost the lead. He would have won that race, I think, if it hadn't been for that incident. So, again, this was pure Ganassi, just being there at the end, picking up the pieces and taking home that win. And Andretti can that's we've spoken about this in the past on the show. That's my criticism of Andretti to a certain extent, especially Colton Herta. And it wasn't his fault this time, but the number of times when he crashed out of races where he would have won more races, maybe even a championship in there, if he just learned to be a little bit more disciplined and follow that sort of, Ganassi Dixon mentality. I mean, Dixon's won 6 of these titles. He's a pretty good guy to learn from.
Yeah. Plus 52 races, right? So
yeah,
you can't really argue with those numbers. Yeah, when we're talking about Dixon, yeah, he's certainly. A lot of people like to compare him to Al Unser Sr., who was kind of the same way. Took care of his equipment, was there at the end, and that's the comparison was made between Big Al and Mario. Mario was balls out, and he probably, wrecked a lot. And here we are again talking about Andretti. So
he was not a happy camper. When his 4th car went out, they cut to him in the pit box, and he was mad.
Yeah,
that was typical Andretti.
he was adding up the damage.
Oh yeah, he was like, "How am I going to pay for this one this week? This is tough."
Yeah, and he's still going to find $600 million to get into Formula One, so he'll be okay.
Yeah. So
what happens when he gets to Formula One and the value of the car goes 10 times up, and he loses 2 cars? He's going to be a wreck.
Yeah,
exactly.
He'll have more gray hair than he does now.
Yeah.
So, but overall, me being a longtime fan of Michael Andretti, it is good to see his team come into this race weekend with some speed, because it seemed like the last couple of years they've been a little bit lost,
Yeah.
So the other, I guess, compelling issue coming out of St. Pete was this tire degradation. It seemed like the Reds were fine if you were in clean air. The greens, the Guali tires, but they seem to really, really just kind of, if you weren't in that clean air, there was not a lot you could do with them, and you had guys begging like Colton Herta was begging the pit, and they're like, "No, you got to make that fuel number, But then
they'll learn.
They'll learn, yeah. It's. The alternate tires is always worn faster than the other, and it's just is a common problem in IndyCar. Well, not that it's a problem; it's a strategy call. You've got to shorten up your
everybody.
Get on the alternates, So, but I really enjoyed the race. TV ratings were decent. They they still fell 3rd behind Formula One and NASCAR. NASCAR and Formula One were 1 and 2. So Lee, what were your other impressions coming out of St. Pete?
I overall, it had a lot of excitement. Like I said, there was rodeos and yard sales. It seemed like it almost every lap, which is an exaggeration because there really wasn't. But it was very exciting. And for a first race, I thought it was, it definitely attention. I'm anxious to see where the rest of the season goes. I thought O'Ward. And when McLaughlin crashed, I was like, "Oh, O'Ward's got this one. He just has to sit there and just stay in clean air, not do anything dangerous. And then he had that difficulty and the mechanical difficulty, electrical, whatever you want to call it. And that I felt heartbroken for the guy, because it was his race to lose, and
and he lost it.
Yeah, and he lost it. But it was I don't think it was a fault of his own. Like, he didn't crash. No. He wasn't he was doing everything right. He was just cruising. He was sitting back in the lazy boy, and then the gas went out from underneath him. And I felt heartbroken for the guy, because I mean, like, he did, it was really his race to lose, and unfortunately he did. And like you said, Ganassi was there to pick up the pieces. You don't always have to be the fastest guy or fastest team in the bunch. All that matters is you made it through all the mishaps, and your equipment's still going at the end. And that's what happened with Ganassi. And I mean, I'm definitely hooked. I set the DVR midway on a commercial break in the Indy race, and I got the rest of the season's hitting and record button. So I'm looking forward to this. Thanks for putting on the rose glasses for this one. I think it's going to be fun.
yeah.
It was all for you, that show. Yeah, next week's going to be boring. Then you were watching, and they made an effort, and next week, forget it.
We got as typical with IndyCar, we got a couple weeks off before we're at Long Beach. Yep. Long Beach is always a good one. That's one of the classic races on the schedule. It's probably the next to Indianapolis. It's the probably the most prestigious race on their schedule. So we'll be heading there in a couple weeks.
Don't crash into the fountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see some of these guys that are starting out behind the 8 ball. You figure both Meyer-Shank cars didn't complete lap 1, so we didn't see what they were made of. I mean, Simon was actually fairly impressive in qualifying compared to where they were last year. And Elliott is, he was starting near the back, as he's it's kind of funny. Last year, Elliott was both the Shank cars had struggles, but Elliott was behind Simon. But Simon actually was, kind of close to the top of the leaderboards through some of qualifying or some of the practice, but he didn't get the starting position he wanted and end up caught up in that first lap stuff. Joseph Newgarden, another guy who got him to win a championship. Mechanical took him out of the race. Will Power, guy wanted to defend his championship, take it out of the race, took himself out of the race.
Yeah, he took himself out of the race there. Frank.
Himself out,
took himself out.
Took Colton Hurd along with him. So
yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how these guys are gonna, kind of calm down and try to reel back in them points. It's not a really long season in IndyCar. Like when you talk about Formula One or talk about NASCAR, it's a long season. Well, IndyCar, not so much. You got 17 races. And the double points for the 500 are gone. So you've got
they gone?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I've been.
I know you've been. You're
That's
not
a pet hate of mine.
Yeah, you're not a fan of the double points anywhere. No. So they are gone for this year. They do still have the qualifying points, which I find odd. But the fact that the 500 they have a whole separate race weekend just for qualifying. So, give those guys a couple points there. Why not? So, but yeah, Richard, any thoughts of yours coming out there? Who do you kind of like after watching this? Because you got to say, even though McLaughlin didn't get to finish, still looked pretty darn good. Award pretty darn good. But
it was the usual suspects, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
McLaughlin, I think, is going to be I wouldn't surprise me if McLaughlin is not the lead driver at Penske this year. He's really stepped up, and he's had a couple of his first year was okay learning. Last year he really started to contend on a regular basis, and I think this year is the year when he needs to step up and really start to push himself. And I think obviously being in the Penske organization, you've got that. As a given, that they've got the tools and the resources. He's got a new race engineer who I actually worked with in the past. Great guy, so they'll have good camaraderie there. He's from Australia as well, so they'll have a pretty good setup there on the engineering side. And yeah, I think they'll look good. Grosjean looked good. Grosjean looked, he got pole. He led away from the start well. It's just that pit stop sequence and getting out behind McLaughlin, which caught him out. If he'd got out ahead of McLaughlin there, I firmly believe he would have driven off and won that race, which, again, Grosjean's in his second or third year now, and he's got to stop having these, weekends where he's nondescript. He's got to be competitive every weekend, and he's 1 for 1 on that. He just unfortunately didn't get the result potentially deserved, and but then you look at Ganassi and they're just doing what they do. They're picking up points when they need. You look at McLaren, who are probably going to be up there. They had glimpses of pace, but that race probably fell into Pato O'Ward's lap if he hadn't had the issue. So they need to show a bit more raw pace. But then it's disappointing from teams like Rahal, Ladderman, Lanigan Racing. You expect more from them. I don't know if it's the driver lineup. I don't know what you guys think about that, but they're just not there. They're making this big thing about the new shop they've built outside of Indianapolis, and I know they're recruited pretty heavily on the engineering side. They've got some XF1 technical director in there. I can't remember who that is off the top of my head, but they pumped a lot of money into it, and it was,
Yeah, Rahal was out to lunch all weekend, and for the most part last year they were out to lunch, and the same with the Ed Carpenter team as well. Ed Carpenter team seems out to lunch, but who looks pretty good moving up in the world? Yunko's team.
Yeah, Callum Ilott was there, wasn't it?
Callum Ilott was right there, and Canapino was. I want to say he made it into the 6th or 7th.
That's the best finish, isn't it? I think.
I believe so, yeah. But and then Canapino was pretty good all weekend for his first race. Nothing spectacular. He didn't challenge for the lead or anything, but he was in the top half of the field, rather than the bottom half with the Carpenters and the Rahals of the world. So yeah, so it's very, very encouraging for them. And again, Ricardo Juncos is a guy I really like. As a person and as a businessman. He's done such a good job in the junior teams and whatnot. And and again, here's a guy who's proud of his country and proud of where he's from, and proud of the folks that work for him. And he's just he puts himself out there as just a real genuine person, which I think is refreshing and some in today's business world now and again. And Mike Shank's a bit the same way too. Mike Shank puts himself out there as just a pretty good dude there. So, but speaking of Mike Shank, since we need to kind of move off of IndyCar, but let's talk about the penalties that were announced today for the Rolex 24, which was 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Where Shank won the race there.
Yeah. They still won the race.
They're letting them keep the win. Unfortunately, they're not letting them keep the points
or the money.
Or the money. Yeah, you got to pay that money back. Yeah, prize. Your prize and money check bounce. Yeah. So So Richard, take us through that a little bit. You read up on it some. It's has to do with manipulating the tire pressures or the tire pressure data. I'm not sure if it was the pressures themselves or just the data.
So I didn't get the full gist of it, but from my understanding, each team has to present data to IMSA showing their tire pressures throughout the race. Now, the tire pressures are tightly controlled by Michelin within a band of a pressure range, cold and hot pressures, because these things fail at 180 miles an hour on the banking at Daytona. You've got a pretty big mess on your hands. So they are critical values, and we've seen that in Formula One. We see it in NASCAR to a certain extent. I mean, NASCAR don't have your conventional TPMS, but a tire pressure monitoring system. Formula One, IndyCar, IMSA, they all have these, high-tech method of monitoring tire pressures. And at the end of the race, the teams present the data to IMSA to say, look, this is what our tire pressures were throughout the day, throughout the 24 hours. And on the face value of it, the pressures from the winning 60 car that won the race were within the predetermined values by IMSA. Now, it appears that Honda the Honda group who made the car that Shank was racing have audited the data, looked at the data, gone back retrospectively through it, and noticed discrepancies in the raw data that they pulled off the car and the data that was presented to IMSA. And from what I understand, one of the engineers on the car applied a scaling offset or some differentiating value to the raw data that was pulled from the car and to what was presented to IMSA. So the assumption there is that they were running under pressure during the race. Now, whether that was deliberate, whether that was accidental, we don't know the background of it. I believe the engineer involved there was a reasonably experienced guy. So, a bit of obviously he didn't tell people. People were aware of this. And yeah, it's sort of come back to haunt them. And as soon as IMSA have found out about it, they've obviously done their own research, and they've come down pretty hard on them. They still keep the win.
Yeah, but let me ask you this though, right? So if they're running under inflated tires, right, or somewhat, remind me of the Tom Brady and the.
Yeah, I was just going to say, are the Patriots associated with this team?
Yeah. So, but I mean, if you go back and watch that race, right? The Shank cars had so much straight line speed, right? They were just class of the field, right? Mm-hmm. Is that deflating the tires a little bit, running lower tire pressures? Is that a fairly significant performance advantage, or do you think these guys probably would have won anyway because the car was so darn good?
Well, this is one of the problems. They probably would have won anyway, so it's a bit of a stupid penalty to eat. But it's more the fact, I think, that it's a safety consideration rather than a performance consideration. Every team will want to push tire pressures, tire temperatures to the limit. If it's just a tenth of a PSI, they still think it's an advantage, even if in reality it's not. So yeah, it's more the concept, and probably the punishment more reflects the fact that they went about this in a slightly underhand manner. I think if they'd been upfront with it at the time of the penalty, I think they would have got away with it, or at least the penalty wouldn't be as harsh. But I think it's more the way that it went around, and they were sort of seen potentially to be sort of pulling the wool over the eyes of IMSA, which no scrutineering organization or no team, no organization that runs these series is ever going to take kindly to be made look like fools. So I think that's where the penalty comes in, rather than any direct performance correlation.
All right, so let me ask you this though. So it is, to me at least on the surface, right? It seems a little odd that it's Honda Performance HPD that came to IMSA with this, essentially throwing their own team under the bus, right? And again, it's probably Honda says we want to get this out in the open before somebody else finds out about it, and then we look like the bad guys, and Honda's trying to wash their hands of it. So I mean, you think this negatively fractures the relationship between the Meyer-Shank team and Honda? Because they've got literally they've got Honda engines in the IndyCar series. They're running the Acuras in this, or do you think this was maybe discussed pretty fully in the boardroom between the team and the Honda and whatnot, and they're kind of all on the same page with it?
I'd think so. I think there's, Honda had to do what they did. If they're aware of this, and as you say, it comes out in the open, it's pretty damning for everybody involved. And I think the best reaction here is that they held their hands up and they've said, look, we've got a problem here. Let's move on, accept it, and, go compete in Sebring at the 12-hour. So, it probably will cause, who knows? Shank may be the ones that were on board with it as much as anybody. So, you know, that they take what they take and they, you know, go forward with it. I doubt there'll be too much friction there. I mean, the Myashank organization is pretty experienced and they know how these things work. And as I say, I think by looking at the penalty, this was a rogue. And I could be completely wrong here, but you know, the last thing I want to do is talk out of turn against an engineer. But I get the impression this was a rogue engineer who made a decision to try and potentially cover himself or, you know, cover the team. And yeah, they've got to bite it and take the penalty there. Trophy's still in the cabinet though.
Yeah, but that guy's probably looking for work. So, but
yeah,
we'll check LinkedIn and see. So, Lee, you have any thoughts on this topic at all, or shall we move on?
No, I mean, real quick, the tire pressure thing, from my experience, you know, a low tire pressure situation on any vehicle, to include a race car, it is not really a performance enhancing thing for me. From my knowledge, low tire pressure equates to more gas being burnt because you have a bigger footprint for the engine to propel down the street, you know, on the course.
Yeah.
A higher tire pressure is, you know, you know, there's not a lot of grip on a higher tire pressure. So you may burn, you know, to me, you know, they still won the race, even with low tire pressure. They were probably, even if they ran the right tire pressure, they were still going to win the race. They were just that, to me, they were just that dominant of a team. The low tire pressure, I think, you know, probably did them bad because fuel consumption goes down. I mean, I know when I run low tire pressures on my truck, my fuel economy goes down. So I would correlate that, you know, me being not the racing engineer guy, I would equate that to be, well, the fuel mileage is going to go down. But again, they won the race on low tire pressure. It's a violation. They got to pay the price. You know, still got the trophy for now. Still got the win. They just lost a bunch of other stuff. So, yeah, I just, you know, it needed to be taken care of, but I don't, you know, I really don't think it would have caused, you know, they still wouldn't have won the race in my book. Yeah. So
yeah.
No, you're very right when you're right when you say that it probably didn't cost them you know, they probably still won. But what you have to remember, and what you were saying there on the tire pressure is typically right. But what you've got to take into account here is your thermal heating of the tire. So your tire will start off cold. These tires aren't like Formula One in tire blankets. They go on the car cold. So the pressure that you have at that moment in time when you install the tires is the lowest pressure it'll ever be. So throughout the run, the temperature will increase in the tire, and because the volume of the tire stays the same, the pressure will increase. And as the pressure increases, you're reducing your contact patch with the track surface. So the only negative about running low pressures is you get greater tire wear at the start of the run because you have more tire surface in contact with the road. So you heat the tire up faster, and then obviously as the pressure builds, you get a smaller contact area, and you're getting isolated heating on a very, very small band. So you get tire, you know, you wear that shoulder, typically the inside shoulder. If you're running enough camber, you'll heat that up faster. Now, if you're running lower pressures, you'll never get to a really small contact patch. Your contact patch is always going to be a little bit larger. So your tires won't get as hot, so you won't wear as quick. So you always want to run your tires in a racing world at lower pressure as possible. The negative side of that is your tire starts to literally roll on the rim. When you know, the lateral loads on these tires are so high that you can actually, and I've seen it, pop a tire off a bead by the lateral load you put through it. So that's why they put the minimum tire pressure levels in there, to make sure that you're not going to, you know, as you're going up the banking at Daytona, pulling 3-4G possibly laterally, you know, you're not going to roll the tire off the rim at low pressure. So you really, really, you always want to, you know, run as lower pressure as possible. And, you know, Frank, you know, if you followed NASCAR over the years, you know.
Oh yeah, we've seen it a lot in NASCAR. These guys underinflate the tires, and then they bleed
the tires.
And then they blame Goodyear for giving them a crap tire.
Yeah. In some racing series, you can actually have you're allowed to run valve stems that lead pressure, that bleed pressure out to maintain a certain lower tire pressure. NASCAR, that's forbidden, although teams over the years have come up with some ways around it by poking holes in the side of the tires, for example, to bleed the pressures out. So you always want to try and get that. And they were just pushing the envelope, I'm sure. And, maybe it was an honest mistake. Maybe it was just a guy trying to cover himself. Who knows? But yeah, not a great look for the team.
No,
Agreed.
Not at all. So,
and I think if this had been discovered in scrutineering post-race, they would have lost the win. I think the reason they've kept the win is because of that time period.
Because it's been more than a month. So,
yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about Formula One. Formula One had their season opener in Bahrain. And again, like we talked about it last week, we should just not try to pick the winner because it's going to be Verstappen every week, and we should try to pick who finishes second. So, and we weren't wrong for the win there, but it was Red Bull 1-2 as a matter of fact, and we had talked about Perez, Checo trying to make the most of it, seeing as how Red Bull has said this car is a little better suited for him. But it was the guy in third place making all the headlines. Fernando Alonso has joined the Aston Martin team, who's typically been, a mid to backfield running team. And here they are. I mean, I want to say Alonso was fastest in the opening practice session. Qualified well, ended up on the podium. And then his teammate Lance Stroll, who's driving injured with broken fingers, came home with the points finish as well. So here's probably, most improved team of the year, Aston Martin. And it's got to be some engineering, but you got to give Alonso a little credit for that. It seems like a lot of places that he's gone to, and he's doing nearly every team on the grid by now. He makes them a little better. So, so Richard, what were your impressions of the Grand Prix down in Bahrain?
Well, I think, Frank, you'll remember this, I don't, but I think we're getting, deja vu of 1988 here, potentially with McLaren dominance in 88. It does look, I mean, one race into a 22 race season now, but it looks pretty ominous that, Red Bull could run the tables here, and I don't think anybody was surprised. And taking a step away from, necessarily reviewing Bahrain, this is one of the issues you have with the cost cap. Where are Ferrari, where are Mercedes going to find the budget to overhaul Red Bull? Every tenth of a second out there has a cost, and the teams will know it. The teams will turn around and say, okay, we need to find 0.3 of a second a lap. Well, that's $15 million or whatever it may be. Well, where's that money going to come from with the budget cap? So it's the budget cap's not always a great thing in terms of improving the quality of the racing, just purely by the dynamics of how car development works. Unless you can find something cheap, you're just really sort of going through the motions. But we'll see how that plays out over the rest of the season. But jumping back into the race weekend we just saw, it was a Red Bull masterclass. Reliability was at 100%. Drivers all seem hooked up and tuned into the cars really, really well. Checo, I think, was a little bit closer probably to Max than he had been in the past. So maybe the car does suit him a little bit better. Still, I think Max has got 2 or 0.3 of a second a lap in his pocket at a drop of a hat. Ferraris were poor, Mercedes were poor, and Aston Martin was the real standout of that mid-pack.
McLaren was horrible.
McLaren struggled. I think. I think Lando Norris's race. I think the car was actually more competitive than they anticipated. I think they were worried about not getting out of Q1, but I think the company made it into Q2 there. And I don't think the pace was terrible. Lando just had a pneumatic leak, and I think he had to stop 6 times or something throughout the race to keep his air pressures topped up. So that sort of masked it. And then Oscar Piastri did okay. Nothing outstanding there. He qualified in the same spot that Daniel Ricciardo qualified last year. So, is there anything amazing coming out of that? Probably not. And he had a technical issue early in the race. I think it was by sounds of things, it was such a wiring issue in the steering column, which is never good. That sort of stuff should never change year on year massively. So to have a failure like that is not a great look. The AlphaTauri team was poor. They were at the back with De Vries and Tsunoda. The Haas team, although Hulkenberg had a great qualifying session to get in the top 10, they looked really poor during the race. And again, a lot of people, a lot of the feedback on that was tire management, which again is something they've struggled with in the past. Williams looked a lot more competitive, I think, than we anticipated.
Yeah, Williams looked pretty good. Our American rookie.
Yeah, I mean,
finished 12th. I mean, that's respectable for a first Grand Prix. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Within 10 seconds of Albon over a race distance was pretty good. Obviously, Albon being the better driver probably also got the benefit of the good strategy call. So maybe a couple of seconds in there as well on raw pace. Albon sort of gained there, but typical Albon, defensive drive. You look back to Miami last year for a similar result where he took a car, probably a 13th, 14th place car, maybe a 15th place car, and got it into the top 10 by just a really, really solid, good experienced drive, which is exactly what a team like Williams need right now. Valtteri Bottas got some points there. But yeah, the Aston Martin are obviously the talk of the town that week. There's a lot of questions, and I think Sergio Perez made a little underhand comment and said, last year's Red Bull's still better than everybody else, implying that Aston Martin is a pretty strong copy of Red Bull's aero package from last year, which, we've seen that in the past from the organization when they a couple of years ago, they brought out what looked like a Mercedes carbon copy print. And, in all fairness, Lawrence Stroll isn't stupid. He knows how to make money and make money quickly. And if he sees a car that's quick, he'll say, well, build one of those, And there has been a lot of recruitment from Aston Martin, a pretty high level engineering recruitment, and on the technical director side of things. So, yeah, those, people will naturally bring in those resources and that knowledge and that way of working and that design philosophy. That will make you competitive. So no, not a huge surprise there. And obviously with Alonso as the driver, what you're going to get from him. You know what you're going to get from a guy like Alonso. And he showed his class. He showed how good he is. It's fascinating to listen to Alonso on the radio. They were making comments during the race that 25% of his time he spends racing. 75% of the time he's thinking about the actual race as well. So, yeah, it's great to watch. I love watching him. He's so in tune with not just his car, but everything else that's going on around him. He was asking how Stroll was getting on throughout the race. They didn't mention to Alonso that it was Stroll that almost took him out of the race at the turn 4 incident, which I thought was quite amusing. Yeah, we're looking into that one, Fernando. And all throughout the race, he was like, who hit me? Who hit me? 50 laps into the race, he was still asking who hit him on lap 1. So it's like, I'm sure he learned pretty quick after the race who it was. But, that's all good fun. And, we've got an off weekend. And then we're still in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia at, the high-speed street circuit of Jeddah. So we'll see what that brings us.
Yeah, Jeddah's always a fun one. Yeah. So, Lee, you have some impressions on the Formula One race before I've got another Formula One story I want to get into, but I want to see, what you've got just sheer from the race.
Sure. I thought the race was really good. Alonso, very impressive. And I think post-race, it was even more impressive. I noticed something with Alonso after this race, and maybe it's just being with Aston Martin, but his attitude has changed. Not a lot, but a little. It's changed. Typically, to me, Alonso, if you asked him, well, do you have a chance at winning, at Jeddah next race? Typical old Alonso would have, really been like, well, the Red Bull cars are tough to beat. We're going to give it 100%. We'll try to get there. This week they asked him the question. He said, what are your chances of winning at Jeddah next race? And he's like, oh yeah, we can do it. So he's kind of gone from to a lot more positivity and I don't know if that's because of Aston Martin behind him and the team that he's got, but he definitely, I noticed the change. I mean, I'm not a huge F1 guy, but Alonso's, he's a talk of the F1, and I've seen post-race interviews, and he always just seemed kind of blah, but this week he seemed very upbeat and was positive about it.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I look at when the last 2 years when Seb Vettel was there, he had a similar approach and demeanor as well. You're out of that pressure cooker of a Ferrari environment, and I'm sure Aston Martin's a lot more laid back, and also I think Aston Martin relies on its drivers a lot more, especially the experienced drivers, to help lead the ship. Whereas, Ferrari, where Seb was, and Alpine, where Aston Martin, where Alonso was, it's probably a bit more of a pressure cooker environment. And, there's a lot of egos there on the technical side. Whereas, Aston Martin, maybe it's a little bit different. And they say, hey, you tell us what you want. And it's more driver-led than it is
engineering-led.
Or ego-led, should we say. And, I think that both Seb and, because I thought it's a shame in a way that Seb isn't out there still, because I still think he's a top driver even now. But his demeanor last year, I thought was great. His attitude and the way he presented himself, he'd grown into that role really, really well. And I think it's something you're going to see from Fernando this year as well. And I think it's going to make him a better driver, because it suits his sort of mentality. So it's going to be a fascinating year behind Red Bull. I don't think for a minute that they're going to win in Jeddah. I think that's
no.
That's
unless Max and Checo take one another out.
Yeah, which I don't think is going to happen. Yeah,
again, 1988 all over again.
Yeah, and so speaking of 88, so like everybody said, Aston Martin is carbon copying Red Bull, which I completely agree with. I mean, you look at that, 8-9 years ago, Ford was the dominant brand in NASCAR. Every car company was chasing Ford. Like, they were doing everything to try to get on Ford's level, because Ford they could not win. They could not lose a race. And, Chevy was dumping tons of money to try to stay in it, to be competitive against the Fords. And I think it's the same thing, these, Aston Martin and, all these teams in F1, they see how good Red Bull is, and they're going to start carbon copying, Red Bull. They're going to just be like, well, that's the winning solution. Might as well go do what they're doing. And because it's the ebb and flow of racing. A team gets that advantage, and everybody else wants a piece of that cookie. We got to do what they're doing. They're winning races, a lot of them. We got to go. We got to get there. And I just Red Bull this year, they're just, are they going to win every race? There's a possibility. I don't think, mathematically, the odds are terribly against them, but possibilities
could be worth a little flutter on it right now.
Yeah,
but there's more to it than that, because they have so much information now on competitors' cars. The FAA have really been trying to open this, so the teams actually have to present their cars in pit lane pre-race, and everybody can walk up and down. All the other teams can walk up and down. Photographers can get photographs of everything. And now, twice a year, I think it's twice a year, each engine manufacturer in Formula 1 has to give like a 30-minute show and tell on how their engine works, which is unheard of in Formula 1 going back a few years. But it's more than that. For the last 10 years, you've had digital photography, which is so good that you can take a photograph of another car on a track, and you can create a model of that in your CFD program within hours, to the millimeter accuracy and precision. So all these teams know exactly what all the other teams are doing. But where the level is at Formula 1, where it works, it's not so much what your car looks like, it's how it works. And everything is so integrated. You couldn't take a front wing off a Red Bull and put it onto a Mercedes and expect it to be a second a lap faster. It would probably be 3 seconds a lap slower, because of the way the air, the front wing contorts the aeroflow over the rest of the car. The front wing, it develops a little bit of downforce, but it's not its main purpose. And everything has to be integrated and work together. Now, design philosophies can certainly work, like the sculpted side pods and the channels that you're now seeing down the side of the side pods, and the slightly more bulbous engine covers to help packaging and cooling through the rear of the car. But you can't just run a photocopier through these things. And that's where I think Aston Martin have stepped up, because they haven't just copied the Red Bull. And I think there's more to it than that. I think if you look at the rear end, it's very Mercedes-like, which isn't a surprise because they have Mercedes engine and gearbox.
Yeah.
It's how that works. It's how you set the car up. It's how what toe you run, what camber, what caster, what damper settings, what ride height. There's so many things you can vary on these cars that you can completely screw your race weekend by getting one of those things wrong, even if your car is the most aerodynamically efficient package out there. So yeah, a lot of people are making the quick oh look, they've copied that, but it's the people that they've hired which say, okay, this is the window that the car operates in now. This is how we have to set the car up, and understanding how the drivers like the car set up. Because Red Bull is a prime example. Max is a very rear end happy driver. He likes the rear end to slide. He likes to brake, have a lot of front brake.
That almost sounds dirty, man.
Family show? I don't know.
But he likes the car very pointy, whereas Checo doesn't. But of course, Red Bull are going to build a car and set it up around their best driver. And you see that if you copy a car, is the driver going to react to it in the same way that he would a car that maybe he's more suited to driving? So it's a lot more than just copying a car, but they make cheap headlines, basically.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So the other Formula One story I wanted to touch on before we move on and talk about Chase Elliott and this NASCAR race we have behind us was there's like one of these tobacco watchdog groups, right, called Stop, and then another advocacy group called Formula Money that seemed to be very upset with Netflix because they said Netflix is in essence advertising cigarettes and giving tons of cigarette advertising time with the Drive to Survive. Now, I mean, if you ask me, right? Okay, so what is banned, right? Tobacco products, right? So what is BAT and Philip Morris advertising? Nicotine pouches and vape, right? Two products that don't even contain tobacco, right? But I think these guys are just upset because the money's going to the tobacco company, or these products coming from the tobacco company. So it's really, I have a hard time kind of understanding what they're upset about, other than the fact they just hate tobacco companies and they don't like to see them getting their name out there. But I mean, my God, Philip Morris owned Kraft for a while, right? So if we put macaroni and cheese on the car, right, would that be, here, now we're supporting?
That's probably just as bad for your health.
Yeah, well, I like Kraft mac and cheese, just saying. But yeah, I'm just like, it's just of all the silly things for me to read today, I'm like, okay, well, if they were really circumventing the rules, somebody would do something about it. And they did actually put a little stop to the Mission Winnow or whatever they called it
now.
on
Win Now. Yeah.
Mission Win Now, which was essentially Marlboro, but they kind of put the kibosh on that. But now they've they're advertising the nicotine pouch views, right? Whoever that's BAT, I believe.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they want to legislate this stuff out, go ahead and legislate it out. But until they do, they're not breaking any rules, right? I mean, so, the next thing you're going to see, because we've already got CBD oil companies racing, right? The next thing is just going to be legalized marijuana, right? We race in Colorado.
Okay, so
you know what I mean,
look at the 3 Chai car.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's
car.
That's what I'm talking about.
3 Chai is it's a cannabis company, and they're running prime sponsorship on a NASCAR. Like, we got to yell and scream about tobacco, Winston Noble and all this stuff. Tobacco companies got forced out of NASCAR, 10, 15 years ago, but yet you can run a 3 Chai as a prime sponsor on a car. That's it. Like, okay.
Because it's not been legislated out yet. I mean, there's
it's still illegal.
I mean, the thing is, if you really examine the what they call the master tobacco settlement, it wasn't legislated out so much as the big tobacco companies agreed to stop funneling money into sports sponsorships in exchange for protection from class action lawsuits.
Yep.
So that's kind of how it reads. But why be mad at Netflix and say Netflix is advertising cigarettes? Because you know what, I haven't seen a single guy fire up a smoke on Drive to Survive yet. They should be worried about all the cursing they do on there.
You want a random piece of trivia? So 16, 17 years ago, I broke my leg pretty badly, and I was in hospital for a couple of weeks getting it all fixed. And there was I think the guy was like in his early 90s, so he's probably no longer with us, unfortunately. In one of the beds on the same ward as me, and we got talking. Fascinating guy. And back in the 60s and 70s, he worked for John Player, JPS.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the marketing director, and he got the black and gold livery on the Lotus cars. He negotiated all that.
Nice.
So he knew Colin Chapman and Graham Hill and all these guys back in the day. And he was the first person to ever get major brand sponsorship on a Formula One car. And it's like, this is an amazing, fascinating guy to talk to. He really was. He was in his early 90s, but still sharp as a tack. And we had some great conversations in those 2 weeks. I mean, there's nothing else for us to do. But
all right. So you broke your leg, but speaking of broken legs, that's a nice segue. It's a nice segue. Talk about Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott, one of the championship favorites.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Well, I never know. I mean, how many races did Kyle Busch miss with his broken legs? Still, 11 or 12, right? 11 or 12 races. So Chase Elliott's going to be out 6 weeks. Broke his leg. What was he snowboarding or
snowboarding,
something like that? Yeah.
Yep.
So now the question is, does he get a waiver? Now, first off, who's filling in for him? Josh Berry's going to take all the oval races, and it'll be Jordan Taylor at COTA. And I'm kind of excited about that. I like Jordan Taylor. I like all the Taylors, Wayne and Jordan. I like that whole family as drivers, and I like their race team. So I'm really interested to see how Jordan Taylor does in a top tier NASCAR team at COTA. I think he's
got a lot. I mean,
he's gonna be fun to watch. Yeah,
2017 Rolex 24 with Jeff Gordon.
Sure,
his
yeah,
teammate. Yeah. I mean, like,
and he's
got a ton of sports car wins.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's ironic because he's been announced as the driver coach for the Garage 56 project. And he's like, how can I driver coach Jenson Button, Jimmy Johnson, and is it Matt Rockenfeller, the other guy?
Yeah,
yeah.
I think Kimi Räikkönen's coming back doing another one.
Kimi Räikkönen's doing COTA as well in the Cup Series with I can't remember who it was with now. The 91 car, is that the Trackhouse entry again?
I believe so. The Project 91.
Yeah, Kimi's coming back, which is great. Going to a circuit that he knows. I'm excited to expect some pretty good things from Kimi. I think this could be he could turn some heads this at COTA. This coming,
certainly,
whatever it is.
Yeah. So, but we were talking about Chase Elliott. So yeah, does he get the waiver, right? So what's the precedent, right? So and Richard, I know your thoughts on this, and I'm rather aligned with you, right? If he got injured in a NASCAR race like Kyle Busch did, absolutely he should have the waiver, right? Now Kurt Busch was given a waiver when he was suspended by NASCAR for some off-track stuff with the crazy ex-wife, and it turned out that he was
assassin.
The assassin. She claimed to be a CI, but once he was kind of exonerated of that, it turned out that he wasn't, an abusive spouse or whatever. They gave him the waiver. And again, that was because NASCAR suspended him. But if we look back, didn't Tony Stewart get a waiver when he flipped a dune buggy? Yep. Yeah. So he was not, doing anything, sanctioned by NASCAR. He was just on his own. And so that's the precedent. If they gave Tony a waiver for that, they should give Chase the waiver, right? But I don't. That's I mean, because you want to be consistent. But I personally, I don't feel that they should. But
no,
they've got to be consistent one with the other. So I know Richard and I both think that I don't think that he should get a waiver. He probably will. Number one, he's their golden boy, right? He's
Yep.
But Lee, what are your thoughts?
So I'm in the same pool as you guys. I don't think he should get a waiver. You talked about precedents and past drivers getting waivers for off-track incidents that weren't involved with the sport. Those are precedences, but when do you stop? When does the precedence change? At some point, there has to be a change to the changing of the guard. And unfortunately, is Chase Elliott going to be that one that forces NASCAR to change the policy on the waivers for injuries sustained on unofficial events?
Yeah, didn't somebody get a waiver for just like general illness or had to get a surgery?
COVID's been during the COVID season.
Yeah.
So COVID's been.
That's one
thing. I think a medical
right?
issue. Now, I don't know if Brian Vickers ever got a.
That's what I was thinking. Brian Vickers,
Yep.
I don't think Vickers ever made the.
No, he never made the playoffs. But I think it's and also this year now with them having removed that
top 30,
playoffs, that top 30. Chase comes back, he wins a race, he's in the playoffs. End of story. Which is fine because those are the rules. But it's one thing that frustrates me a little bit with any professional athlete. Professional athletes across the board have fundamentally so few responsibilities compared to you and I. They've got people doing everything for them they could ever imagine. They eat, sleep, and piss with somebody telling them when to do it. And, you've got to take responsibility for it. You've got to take responsibility for your actions. And you've got to know that you're letting your sponsors down, you're letting your team down. Just think about everybody on that team that works their asses off every week for that 9 car. And, they've probably got performance-related bonuses. And because this kid can't stay on a snowboard, they're going to be financially hit right now.
Yeah, they're not going to get the same result out of a Josh Berry that they are out of a Chase Elliott.
There's no disrespect to that guy, but Chase, in 10 years' time, he's not going to, I missed 5 races and I lost $1 million. Okay, well, that's not going to be an issue to him. But the guy who's paying his mortgage and the guy who's got 3 kids who's putting through elementary school or whatever, and he loses a couple $100 or $1,000 here and there because of some clause in his contract based on driver performance. Yeah, it is going to be an issue for him. And it does frustrate me when drivers go off and any athlete goes and does this. It's like when years ago there was a professional soccer player in the UK who missed a drugs test and got suspended and complained. Well, you haven't got much responsibility, and there's got to be a price for it. And, I'm not saying ban these guys from doing these things, but they've got to know that if you go off snowboarding or dirt bike riding or whatever,
or
pay the price for
conversely, you've got professional. Who's the guy that blew his fingers off lighting off fireworks, right? Burrs or so pay somebody to light your fireworks for you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Or the guy that's some of these professional athletes or actors or celebrities that get pulled over drunk driving. I mean, you've got the money. Have yourself chauffeured around. I mean, you've got a public persona too.
Exactly.
So anyway, so speaking of, so we are out of time. So we have to do a green-white checker here. So we have overtime. So, but speaking of green-white checker, we need to mention the Vegas race, which did end in a green-white checker after a long time, rather uneventful race right up to the end there. But at the end of the day, it was a Hendrick 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Was it
and 27th?
And 27th. Yeah. So
1, 2, 3, and 27th.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
Was it Byron won? See, Byron and Bowman, I always mix with guys. I think it was Byron Larson, Bowman. So good for them. We were talking about how they seem a little off the pace at Daytona and whatnot, but here they are right back to their winning ways. Too bad they didn't have Chase Elliott there. It could have been a 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's that. So we're off to, is it Phoenix next, right? Phoenix next. So Lee, who do you like?
Low downforce package as well.
Yeah.
We've got a new new low downforce package. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yep. That's that should be interesting, I think. I mean, you say Phoenix, and the only driver that really comes to mind in Phoenix is Harvick. He owns that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
when he retires this year, they're just gonna change it from PIR to like Harvick International Raceway.
Harvick Playground, yeah.
Yeah, he owns that joint. I mean, just like the Bushes own Vegas. I mean, it's Harvick's track. So yeah, if I don't pick Harvick,
There you go. So I'll pick.
Please pick Harvick.
I'll pick Martin Truex. Just so because he ran really well at Vegas. He just had a little problem there at the end there and whatnot. So anyway, so we are out of time. We're overtime actually. So I want to thank you, Lee. I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank Keith Hayes for producing us. I want to thank YouTube. I want to thank Forza Motorsports, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all you folks that watch us every week. But until next week, good night. Next week, big show coming up. We've got Stephen Wilson out of the IndyCar series and his team owner, Don Cusick. So you'll certainly want to tune in for that one. Those are two really interesting guys that you want to hear from. So anyway, so now I'm well into overtime. So now I will say good night and thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching Drafting the Circuits. Make sure to follow Drafting the Circuits on Facebook, Spotify, Twitter, and YouTube. Drafting the Circuits is a Code Sinister One production.